Welcome back to the channel. It's great to have you here again. Today, we're diving into a fascinating and timeless topic, jealousy. But not just any perspective on jealousy. We'll be exploring it through the wisdom of the great Stoic emperor, Marcus Aurelius. What did he have to say about envy, comparison, and possessiveness? And how can his teachings help us find inner peace? Stick around as we uncover 7 powerful lessons on jealousy from one of history's greatest philosophers. 1. Jealousy is a result of misplaced desires. In a bustling Roman port city, there lived a wealthy merchant named Lucius. He had everything: fine clothes, grand ships, and a home filled with gold and treasures from distant lands. Yet, despite his fortune, he was consumed by jealousy. Every time he saw another merchant gaining success, making new trade deals, or earning the admiration of the people, bitterness filled his heart. One evening, as he sat by the docks, he noticed an old fisherman, Marcus, happily repairing his small boat. The fisherman hummed a tune as he worked, completely at peace. Curious and irritated, Lucius approached him. "Marcus," Lucius said, "I do not understand. You have nothing, no wealth, no grand house, no fine clothes. Yet you seem happier than I am. How is this possible?" The fisherman smiled and replied, "Tell me, Lucius, what is it that troubles you?" Lucius sighed. "I see others gaining more wealth, more success. I should be content, but I cannot stop wanting what they have." Marcus nodded and said, "You are like a man dying of thirst, drinking salt water. The more you desire what others have, the thirstier you become. But true happiness is not in gold or in the envy of another man's fortune. It is in being content with what is within your control." Lucius fell silent, realizing the wisdom in the old fisherman's words. He had been chasing wealth, not for fulfillment, but out of misplaced desires, always looking at what others had instead of valuing what was already his. That night, as he walked home, the weight of his jealousy began to lift, replaced by a quiet understanding that peace does not come from possessing more, but from desiring less. 2. External things do not define happiness. In ancient Rome, there was a powerful emperor named Cassius. He had conquered vast lands, built magnificent palaces, and was surrounded by luxury. Yet, despite his power and wealth, he was restless. No matter how much he gained, happiness always seemed just out of reach. One day, while walking through the marketplace disguised as a common man, Cassius noticed a beggar sitting under a fig tree. The beggar, an old man named Felix, had nothing but a simple robe and a small bowl of figs. Yet, he was smiling, enjoying the warmth of the sun. Curious, Cassius approached him and asked, "Old man, why are you so happy when you own nothing?" Felix chuckled and replied, But I own everything I need. The sun gives me warmth, the tree gives me shade, and these figs are sweeter than any feast. Why should I not be happy?" Cassius frowned. "But you have no wealth, no servants, no power. How can you compare your life to mine?" Felix smiled and said, "Tell me, mighty emperor, if you lost your throne tomorrow, would you still be happy?" Cassius hesitated. He knew the answer was no. His happiness was tied to his power, his riches, and the fear of losing them. Seeing his silence, Felix continued, "You chase happiness in things that can be taken away. But true happiness is not found in gold or power. It is found within, in being content with the present moment." Cassius returned to his palace deep in thought. That night, for the first time in years, he sat quietly in his garden, feeling the breeze, watching the stars. And for a brief moment, he understood. Happiness was never in the riches he had gathered, but in the peace he had overlooked. 3. Envy and jealousy are rooted in comparison. In a small Roman town, there were 2 artists, Darius and Elias. Both were gifted painters, known for their beautiful murals that adorned temples and villas. They had grown up together, studying under the same master, yet their paths had taken different turns. Darius had gained great fame. Nobles and merchants sought his work, and his name was praised in the city. He had wealth, recognition, and a grand workshop filled with apprentices. Elias, on the other hand, lived humbly, painting for small villages and temples. His work was admired by those who saw it, but he was not well known, nor did he seek fame. Over time, jealousy took root in Elias's heart. Every time he heard Darius's name spoken in admiration, a sharp pain filled him. Why does he receive all the glory while I remain unnoticed? He wondered. His jealousy turned into bitterness, and he began to resent his old friend. One day, Elias traveled to the city and saw Darius painting a massive mural in the governor's palace. He watched from a distance, expecting to see a man full of pride. But instead, he saw something different. Darius looked weary, burdened by the expectations placed upon him. After the work was done, Elias approached him. "Darius, you have everything: fame, fortune, admiration. Yet you do not seem happy." Darius sighed and replied, "Elias, when we were young, we painted because we loved it. Now, I paint because I must. I chase perfection not for myself, but for others' approval. Yet, I look at you, and I see a man still free. You paint with joy, not pressure. Tell me, who is truly wealthier?" Elias was stunned. He had spent years comparing himself to Darius, thinking he was lesser because he lacked recognition. Yet, he realized that his happiness had never depended on fame. It had only been clouded by comparison. From that day on, Elias painted with gratitude, no longer seeking what others had, but cherishing what was his. And for the first time in years, his art became more beautiful than ever, not because the world praised it, but because he had freed himself from jealousy. 4. You cannot control others, only yourself. In ancient Rome, there was a skilled warrior named Marcus. He had trained for years, mastering the art of combat, and had won countless battles. Yet, despite his strength, one thing always troubled him: his younger brother, Lucian. Lucian was reckless and impatient. He ignored discipline, made careless mistakes, and refused to learn from his elders. Marcus, believing it was his duty to shape his brother into a great warrior, constantly scolded and corrected him. But no matter how hard he tried, Lucian remained stubborn. One day, in frustration, Marcus went to seek advice from an old philosopher in the city. "I have trained soldiers, fought enemies, and disciplined entire armies," he said. "But I cannot change my own brother. No matter what I do, he refuses to listen. How do I make him see reason?" The philosopher smiled and led Marcus to a fountain. He dropped a pebble into the water and said, "Tell me, Marcus, can you command these ripples to stop?" Marcus watched the ripples spread outward and shook his head. "No, that is impossible." The philosopher nodded. "Just as you cannot control the ripples, you cannot control another person's heart. You may guide, teach, and offer wisdom, but in the end, only they can choose to change. The only power you truly have is over yourself, your own thoughts, your own actions, your own peace." Marcus stood in silence, realizing the truth in the old man's words. That night, he returned home and stopped trying to force Lucian to change. Instead, he focused on leading by example, showing patience, discipline, and wisdom in his own actions. Over time, something unexpected happened. Seeing his brother's quiet strength and self-control, Lucian began to change, not because he was forced, but because he was inspired. And so, Marcus learned the greatest lesson of all. True power is not in controlling others, but in mastering oneself. 5. Possessiveness is an illusion. Once, there was a powerful king named Adrian who ruled over a vast and prosperous land. He had everything: gold, a magnificent palace, and loyal subjects. But despite his riches, he was never at peace. He feared losing what he had. Every day, he worried that his wealth would be stolen, that his kingdom would be taken, or that his loved ones would leave him. One day, while walking along the shore, he saw an old man sitting peacefully by the waves, letting the sand slip through his fingers. Curious, the king approached him and asked, "Old man, why do you let the sand fall from your hands so easily?" The old man smiled and replied, "Your Majesty, try holding the sand tightly in your fist." The king scooped up a handful of sand and clenched it tightly. To his surprise, the harder he squeezed, the more the sand slipped through his fingers. The old man chuckled. "You see, my king, the more you try to hold on, the more you lose. Possessions, power, even people, nothing truly belongs to us. Everything in life is borrowed, even time itself. If you learn to appreciate without clinging, you'll finally be free." The king stood in silence, watching the waves wash over the shore. He realized that all his life, he had been trying to hold on to things that could never truly be possessed. That day, he made a change, not by giving up his kingdom, but by letting go of his fear. He ruled with wisdom, not control, and found peace in knowing that true happiness comes not from owning, but from appreciating what is while it lasts. And for the first time in his life, King Adrian felt truly free. 6. A wise person values character over external validation. In a grand Roman city, there was a sculptor named Julian. His hands could shape marble into lifelike statues, and his art was admired by nobles and commoners alike. People praised his talent, and he enjoyed their admiration. But over time, Julian became obsessed with approval. He no longer sculpted for the love of his craft. He sculpted only what would impress others. One day, an old philosopher named Cassius visited Julian's workshop. He examined a newly completed statue, a warrior in gleaming armor, standing tall with a proud expression. "It is impressive," Cassius said, "but tell me, Julian, did you create this from your soul or from your fear of being forgotten?" Julian was startled. "What do you mean?" he asked. Cassius pointed to a dusty, unfinished sculpture in the corner. It was different, simpler, but with deep emotion carved into its features. "This one," Cassius said, "this has truth. It is not made for applause, but for meaning. A wise man does not shape his work or his life for the approval of others. He follows what is right, even if no one sees it." Julian stood in silence. He realized that he had spent years chasing praise, rather than creating from his heart. That night, he returned to the unfinished sculpture and began working on it, not for recognition, but because it was a piece of himself. When it was finally done, it was not displayed in the grand hall of the city. Instead, it remained in his workshop, known only to a few. But for the first time in years, Julian felt fulfilled, not because the world had approved, but because he had been true to himself. 7. Letting go of jealousy leads to inner peace. In a quiet Roman village, two neighbors, Felix and Octavius, both loved gardening. Each had a small plot of land where they grew fruits and flowers. Felix tended to his garden patiently, enjoying the process of planting, watering, and watching things grow. Octavius, however, was always looking over the fence, comparing his garden to Felix's. One summer, Felix's garden flourished. His fig trees bore sweet fruit, his roses bloomed beautifully, and his vines were full of grapes. Octavius, seeing this, felt jealousy creeping into his heart. "Why does his garden thrive while mine struggles?" he muttered. "I work just as hard." Rather than tending to his own soil, Octavius spent his days watching Felix, trying to figure out his secret. He complained about the unfairness of nature. He neglected his plants, and his frustration only grew. One day, an old farmer passing by saw Octavius's wilted garden and said, "Your envy is like a weed. The more you feed it, the more it takes from you. You are so busy looking at your neighbor's garden that you have forgotten to care for your own." Octavius realized the truth in the farmer's words. That evening, he stopped looking over the fence and returned to his own land. He pulled the weeds, watered his plants, and worked with patience. Slowly, his garden began to bloom again. As the seasons passed, Octavius no longer worried about whose garden was better. He had found peace, not by having more than Felix, but by appreciating what he had. And that wraps up today's video on the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius and his teachings on jealousy. I hope these lessons gave you something to reflect on and apply in your own life. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps support the channel. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.